Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. You know that song, you know what it means. It means it's the weekend, and it's time for the James Freel Show. I am your host, James Freel, and as always, I am extremely happy to have you with me. That's a good sound of inhaling. So yes, first time listener, I believe this is episode 45. I really enjoyed doing last week's graphic ad where where I added on the pumpkins. Um, Let me just say from the get go, this is a November show. It's the first day of November. Well, it's the second day of November, but it's the first show that I've done from November. And I'm just gonna say sober October's over. So if that can give you any sort of indication of how this show will compose itself, just letting you know from the get go. But as always, yes, I'm very happy to have you with me. I'm gonna do this now. Okay, listen to this noise. Oh, I don't even think you could hear it. I have one goal for this episode, and that is so that you don't hear any of the. That was a horrible job of describing it, but the noise of. I'm gonna make the noise just so you can hear. Whenever you hear that noise, that is the noise of me adjusting the mic stand, and after that point, I'm going to try to do the rest of this show without making that noise whatsoever. Anyway, I think there's something about having a mic in front of your face that it really makes you feel a little narcissistic. But yes, I'm going to try to get that noise off of this show. But first, before we go into the rambling section, um, yeah, it's another noise I gotta get rid of. It's this noise. So when I'm leaning back in my chair, I could probably just like throw some WD-40 on it and take care of it. That there's another noise I could probably get rid of. Wow. Hey James, you ever think about doing these when you're not trying to record a show? You ever think about that? You ever think that maybe the best time to consider your audio recording techniques is in fact not while you're recording the show, but maybe in preparation for it. Maybe that's the case. Maybe that is. Anyway, so as I've said the past few weeks, I've been very poor about giving attention towards news for the uninformed. And I think the best way to handle that, actually, it's probably the worst way to handle it, but I'm still going to do it, is simply by fusing it. But basically, this means is I'm going to look up the news right now because the whole point of why I do news for the uninformed is so that in 10 or 15, 20 years when I listen back to this show, how old will I be in 20 years? I'll only be 44. It could be worse. It could be a lot worse, but if I understand correctly, the older you get, the faster time goes. So, 5 to 9, is going to feel like 24 to 44. So, I take what I can get here. I take what I can get. So anyway, the whole reason I do news for the uninformed is so that I know what's going on when I listen to this, if and when I listen to it in the future. So the biggest story of this week, it happened right after I did last week's show. There was a shooting in Pittsburgh in a synagogue. And that's very tragic. That is. And I'm not going to insert my political opinion because, as you all know, I have 0 listeners. And I'm trying to build some sort of audience. I got to give it to myself right now. I'm almost on my 20th episode on this platform. And, yeah, I'm still plugging away. Excuse me. Excuse me, listener. Hold on. I got cap locks on. James Freel Show into YouTube. How many videos? I got 20 videos, and one of those is a conversation with James Freel, which I thought was a decent episode, if I do say so myself. So that was the top story. There was a shooting in a synagogue, and it happened very close to the election, and I hate to say that because it makes it feel like, oh, it's a political issue, and I mean, what isn't a political issue at this point? You know, the big thing that's missing from News to the Uninformed is that I don't have that NPR voice going, where I'm like, our top story, a local shooter in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania went into a synagogue this week. Because I like reading with that voice. And definitely didn't do it. I hope you can't hear my neighbors right now. But as I say that, I think you can. Moving on. Top story in sports. Because sports is still a thing. The Boston Red Sox won the World Series on either Sunday or Monday. Won it in 5 games. Right on. So I think it was 2 weeks. Yeah, I believe it was 2 weeks ago that I made the prediction that it would be the Dodgers who would win the whole thing, and I was wrong. So I make predictions. I'm not always right. I didn't have really any confidence in that prediction. I just sort of made it on the fly. Like, you know what? I'll go with the Dodgers. My confidence was all stemmed from the joy of potentially being right. So that's that. And in pop culture, Kanye West. This is something I remember. He has now gone back to being on the left side of the aisle. Yeah. After a few weeks of being like wearing MAGA hats and stuff, and I'm already treading on dangerous waters. So yeah, I saw a Musing Onion article. It's like, it looks like Kanye is back on your meds, and without trying to take sides, it's like, oh, because he agrees with you again, he must be back on his meds. But now I gotta say something to offend the other side if I want to truly stay mutual and live up to my name when I say that I am not trying to invoke politics. I don't know. So, let's move on with the rambling section of the James Freel Show. I really should have, it doesn't make sense to not have the Halloween episode after Halloween, but if you really want to get a Halloween episode of a loser in his mid-20s talking about his life and what's going on, you really want to go for the episode after, because that's when I can tell you how my Halloween went. It is what it is. I work with what I got. But anyway, let's talk about my Halloween. So, I believe it was Friday that I last recorded this, and I can't entirely remember if I did it from the bootleg. No, I think I sat down to do it just as I am now. I went to a party where the only person I knew was my better half. There were other people there that I was aware of, but I had never formally met. Let me just say quickly, in sports, hats off to my Cincinnati Bengals beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was a tough game, though, because they were up like a ton, and then they were bungling away the lead. And then once it was tied, they were like, okay, let's go down and win this game. Let's go do what we do. And it's like, could you not do that? Could you just play 4 quarters because you should have destroyed this team? And all I gotta say is it's a good thing that they didn't play Ryan Fitzpatrick the full game. Had they done that, I'm pretty positive we would have lost by double digits. I'm serious, because they put in Ryan Fitzpatrick and bam, bam, bam. I mean, it always upsets me when we only win when the Bengals, my team, when they only win games by defensive touchdowns, and that has been a theme of this year. I can't pause again because I'm worried about the system crashing. It's been a theme. It really has. It's just they they win, and had it not been, I know a win's a win, but still. Also, here on the James Freel Show, I just came up with this genius audio engineering, and by audio, I really should say editing. Every time you always hear that intro and the outro song, I always had those right next to each other, and every single week I would have to cut them up and drag the one all the way down. But I'm like, hey, why don't when I drag it all the way down, I save it there so I don't have to edit it every week. So I just made my job a little bit easier. Rock on. In other news, this week, King of the Hill. King of the Hill is on Hulu now. I don't have Hulu, but Hulu kind of seems like the cool version of it. It seems like if Netflix is Coca-Cola, then Hulu is Pepsi. And let me just talk about that really quick. Now, the truth is, I am a Coke guy, Coca-Cola. If you're going to ask me between the two, I don't even hesitate if you ask which is better. Just if that's the straight question, which is better, Coke or Pepsi? I'm going to say Coke without hesitation. But at the same time, Pepsi does have that like cool factor. I think they nailed it with the Michael Jackson ad campaign in the 80s. You win some, you lose some. Anyway, let me get back to, I was talking about my Halloween. So I went to my better half and I, we drove up to about Dayton, back into Ohio terms, since I'm not lying about living in Toledo anymore on this show. We went up to this house in Dayton. There was a Halloween party, and I gotta say I had a good time. I will say I had an extremely awkward encounter, and I'm gonna tell this to you now. So, because this is what I'm definitely going to listen to in the future, and I'm gonna want to remember this story. So I'm gonna try to convey it the best I can. So I'm like getting a feel for everyone there. And you go to a party, there are a lot of different people there, you meet all these personalities, you're trying to figure out who's who, what's what can I talk about with that person, what can I not, what should I stay away from, what topics are okay. And so they have a garage, and they set up a television in there, and they're playing some old bad horror movies, and it was a great time. I think one of them was Creepshow. There was this episode with this guy who like buried this man in the sand up to his neck and was letting the tide come in. I wasn't really paying attention, but it grabbed my attention at a point of time where I wasn't quite sure the context of all of it. But anyway, I'm there. There are about, let me think of how many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So at this point, I think there are about 6 people there. And this 7th guy shows up. He's got really short hair. And, he kind of comes off as one of those guys who's very confident about himself. And to an extent, I envy that. Because I'm not very confident with myself. And one of the reasons I'm not very confident with myself is I see guys like this and how they behave, and I'm terrified of being like this guy. I don't know how to convey it, but I was not the only one who felt this way, and I would have kept it to myself, and I wouldn't be saying what I'm saying now had other people not been talking about it themselves. Oh, James, you're just gonna talk about something without what you think might makes right. You just say stuff and that suddenly makes it okay. That's not what I'm trying to say, but I guess it's hard to go without saying yeah. That's kind of what happened. So I'm standing in this garage in front of the television. This guy, he had short hair. Let me make up a name for him. Jeremy. Jeremy's right there. This is the guy who's overly confident and not in a good way. And let's call this lady who is there Penelope. Okay. And so I'm kind of out of it, you know. I'm just like fading in and out of conversation, and I'm not good at parties. I'm not very social, so I try to make conversation, and I try to gauge what people like talking about so that I can let them do all the work and let me just sit back and listen. And I notice that Jeremy has a lot of tattoos. And I ask him, you know, he's got enough to where it looks like he knows a lot about the industry. And I'm not a fan of tattoos. I'll just go ahead and say that right from the outset. But you know, live and let live. So I ask him, you know, how does someone go about becoming a tattoo artist? You know, how does someone do that? It seems like you can't just go straight with the needle. And for the most part, every tattoo I've ever seen has been very well done, and it's like someone could easily not do a very good job of tattooing. And what's the copyright like? You know, if I want a photo of Yoda on my arm, how does all that work out? Anyway. I ask him, you know, and he explains it was actually kind of interesting. You get a like an internship. I guess that's what it kind of sounded like. You're gonna hear. You haven't heard any of the adjusting mic stand thing, but you're gonna hear a lot of background noise. Just put my envelope in there. But apparently, it's sort of like you pay to intern with them. And correct me if I'm wrong. Tweet me at James Freel Show on Twitter. Correct me if I'm wrong. And basically, he says, yeah, once you get a feel for it, they start you out on like pig skin, so you can get a feel for all the blades. And then once you're good enough, that just seems kind of crazy. Because if you mess up, you know, you could be in a world of hurt. You know, I one of my family members who I don't know very well is really, really into tattoos and whatnot. I am not a fan, but you know, you do you, you know, and I'll do me. I have no problem with someone deciding to get it. I mean, why do I gotta feel like I'm defending myself constantly? You know, I personally am not a fan, as in I would not get one. But I've seen people with tattoos and they look good. I'm like, yeah, you should totally be. Let me get back to what I was telling, the story I was telling. So we're there. It's me. Jeremy's to my right. He's telling me about tattoos. Penelope's to his right. She's sitting down. Okay, we're kind of semicircled around the television, where none of us are really watching it. And he starts to get kind of loud. He's like, "Yeah, tattoos, man, they're great. You know, I mean, hey, and forgive me, I normally don't venture into this territory, but for the sake of the story, I'm going to." He goes, "Yeah, man, tattoos, they're great, man. You know, they'll get you laid. They'll get you laid. You know." And as soon as he says that, Penelope gives him a stare, and suddenly, you know, I'm in a mental state where I'm thinking, oh, okay, you know, whatever. I mean, kind of an odd thing to bring up, but, you know. And all of a sudden he goes to, well, not always, you know, not always. And I'm not really listening to him. I'm just trying to get him to talk so I don't have to. And I don't remember how. Next thing I know, I hear her say, Penelope say something along the lines of, well, you know, you're a perfect stranger, and this is the impression I'm getting. And before that, he had said something like, you know, I'm not normally like that. I don't think those were his words exactly, but he said something like, I'm not this kind of guy who's trying to. And she came back with, well, you know, you're a perfect stranger to me, and this is all I know about you, and this is the impression that I'm getting from you. And he goes, fair enough, fair enough. And in my head, I'm thinking, man, it would be pretty awkward if this was like a confrontation right now, and I didn't realize it actually was a confrontation. Next thing I know, he's looks at me and goes, well, that got awkward fast. And in retrospect, I could not agree more, because it did get awkward. Luckily, I was not in a state of mind to be paying attention to it. And then later, I go and grab my better half. I'm like, yo, I gotta tell you something. I gotta tell you something. Something just happened. Something went down. Someone. I was freaking out because I'm like, oh, this is the end of the world. And I just want to say, like, yeah, Jeremy definitely came across as an arrogant, kind of I don't want to say a jerk, but yeah, kind of just kind of like a frat boy kind of guy. But at the same time, Penelope kind of had a stick up her ass. It's like I don't think what he said was totally. I mean, if I'm one on one and someone says that, I'm instantly uncomfortable. But I'm not gonna reprimand them for it. Well, I am, but I'm gonna reprimand them in the manner of not talking a lot. Maybe that's exactly what she did, but she fought back because later, when Jeremy left, he was saying goodbye to everyone, and as he left, he said goodbye to Penelope, and he said, "I'm sorry if I offended you this night. I'm a horrible person. I'm a horrible person." Kind of like playing it off like, "Oh yeah, you win. Yeah, I'm such a bad guy. That's what I did." And she fought back. She saw right through that, and she fought back with, "Yeah, well maybe you should work on it. Maybe you should." And I think he was like, "Yeah, maybe I will. Maybe I will." It was very, very passive aggressive, and at the time, my better half and I were facing each other and giving each other looks like, "Oh my goodness, this is really uncomfortable," which it was, which it was. Wow, that ate up a lot of the time here on the James Freel Show. Moving right along, this is an exceptionally social week for me because, okay, it wouldn't have been last night because today's Friday. Today is November 2nd, 2018. And last night I worked, but the night before I went out with a friend who I had not seen in a while. Sorry about my neighbors. Um, and we went out to an old bar that, first off, I'm an idiot because they walked in, I was invited, and I couldn't tell if it was them or not, and I waited in my car like an idiot. And it turns out they said they'll be there around 10. They showed up around 10:05, but I didn't see them walk in, so I waited until 10:30. And I walked in and I saw them, and I saw another guy who I went to elementary school with, who I actually really like, and he's a really successful engineer now, but he was totally gone with alcohol. Like he was black out gone. And I like to party, but it's like there's a certain point where the moment you feel even a little bit queasy, it's like, okay, time to take a step back. Because it's not going to be fun if you're going to have a hangover tomorrow. Anyway, but I there was two out of the five other people there I knew, and I had a good time talking to them. And in a way, it was very much so a walk down memory lane. Sorry about the noise. Because this was a bar that back in high school, back when I was 17, yeah, it would have been 17 because I always did it on a school night. Um, I would go there. This would have been in the fall of 2011. Jeez, 7 years ago. I'm getting old. Getting old. Jeez, but I would go there. At first, I would just do an open mic. And man, I gotta go back and take this walk down memory lane. I used to run an open mic there. I think that's the seventh time I've said that. And the inside has sort of been refurbished. It's been changed up. But it was interesting. And the person who invited me to this gathering once came in to see me for a few minutes. And all in all, it was a good social gathering. I'm working on my social skills. I'm learning. First impressions is really something that I need to work on. And, I got to tell you something. I work, and I'm pretty much on the bottom of the totem pole right now. That's going to change. It is going to change soon. But there's this seasoned vet, and he is my favorite person. I think he's my favorite colleague I've ever seen. When I was in high school, I had this band teacher. And when I was in high school, I thought he was the coolest guy ever because he did not care what someone thought about him. And then I kind of grew up and I started having thoughts about him. and I sort of saw why a lot of people didn't like him. But now I'm seeing this other guy who I currently work under, and maybe when I'm done here, I'll start having thoughts about him, but I feel like he's so cool. He reminds me of Gallagher, the watermelon smashing guy. And, he's an engineer. I don't know. My favorite part about him is, it's just that I see how he carries himself, how he conducts himself, and hold on. He just does not care what other people think of him. And it's not that he has that thought, like, oh, I don't care what people think of me. No, he just doesn't. It's a passive thing. It's a passive action he takes. He just doesn't. He doesn't actively not care. He's him. And he's on his way out. He's, like I said, he's a seasoned vet. And today I just sort of had a bonding moment with him. I needed to see him, and I asked him, like, I had a question about certain things, like, what is this? Do we order these? Do you make these? And he answered it. And then I had another question. He explained to me where those go. He's like, keep the good ones. I like to give those to people who come in for charity. I'm like, man, this guy's a good guy. And he's also the kind of guy who likes to keep... Okay, maybe he does kind of care about what people think of him, because he likes to maintain this image that he's this curmudgeon-y old man who hates everyone. But... And maybe this also goes with it. He likes to have that image, but also have, like, this drop of, oh, you're not a bad guy. You just work hard and you're fed up with life. And he makes a lot of old... I love old man humor, and he is the Louis C.K. of old man humor, or the George Carlin. No, he's the Gallagher. Well, he's better than Gallagher when it comes to old man humor. But he told me, he remembered my name, and I'm just the co-op. And I remember at one point he said, I don't remember co-ops' names, but he started remembering my name. I'm like, hey, you remembered my name, and I'm a co-op. I know you said you only remember full-time employees' names. But I call him Mr. and then insert last name. And I'm not going to give it away because you know what city I'm in, and you might know what hospital I'm in, and you might know. It's not the point. The point is, I think he's a great grand guy. And just as I walked away, he said, "Thank you, thank you, James." And I said, "No, thank you, Mr. Such and Such." And it was a good moment. It was a good moment. Hey, you tune into this podcast to hear guys in their mid-20s bond with old men. But, it's like Plato wrote about in the Republic. I like hearing from old men because I can hear tales of the trail that I will take upon. Or something. I finished this book about the historical account of Jesus, and it was pretty good. Let me just say, I don't practice any religion at the moment. I'm kind of in the market for a new religion, because I think, I feel like people are better. I haven't been actively religious in probably since 2011. I don't know. Who knows? Man, in retrospect, had some real moral conflicts going on. Okay, so we got one more minute to burn here. I don't know if I got to everything I wanted to, but I completed the show here. Bengals are on bye week this week. Go Cowboys. They're not doing so hot. I think they were on bye week this past week. They're just 500, and I don't know if Jason Garrett's going to get fired. King of the Hill's on Hulu. Do you think Hank of the Honk or Hank Hill would want Jason Garrett fired? I don't know. You tell me. All right, folks. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the James Freel Show. I'm your host, James Freel. I will see you next week, and everyone have a good November. I messaged a friend from an old time back this week. But anyway, that will be saved for the next show. Have a good weekend.